So guys, we're going to talk about Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. I saw the movie yesterday, came out the day before, so all this is fairly fresh. I had like one night sleeping over it. And now I'm just going to do a quick brain dump video in which I share my thoughts. This is not really a review of the movie. I think I have to see it a few more times to really form like a finalized opinion, but it is my first impression. These are basically my thoughts that I had when I came out of the cinema. First of all, before we get into it, a few disclaimers. I know everyone has different opinions on this movie. You might hate it, you might love it, you might be a huge fan of the new trilogy, you might hate it to death. Whatever it is, let's debate this reasonably. Okay, I don't want to have a battle down in the comments of people telling each other that they should die because they don't like a Star Wars movie or they like a Star Wars. It's completely pointless. So let's not even go there. The movie currently sits at 58% on Rotten Tomatoes, 6.9 on IMDb. It's 3.5 out of 5 stars on the Google movie rating thing. So it's again, it seems to be a divisive film. And before I get really into highlighting some of the plot things, I want to say this obviously is a spoiler video, okay? I'm going to spoil everything in this video. So if you have not seen the film, then leave right now. I don't want to see a single comment down there where people are like, oh, but you just spoiled it. Yeah, I will spoil it. Okay, I will spoil this film in this video, so I can't make it any more clear. Leave if you don't want to be spoiled. The other thing I really want to say is how much I respect what J.J. Abrams did here. Despite negative things, despite criticisms, I mean, nothing is perfect, and, you know, you could have always done better or whatever, but this was a tough project, okay? Imagine coming out of Rian Johnson's Last Jedi Episode 8, and now someone gives you a blank piece of paper and says, now finish it. You know, make the last movie of this 9-movie trilogy. Bring it to an end. Answer all the questions. You know what a tough job this is? What a big challenge that is? So just for completing it in a way that is not a complete catastrophe or car crash is already admirable. And I think you can feel this burden in the movie. When you're watching it, it does feel like a lot of eyes glanced over the script and changed it and amended it and made it perfect and removed one word there and tweaked one letter here. And ironically enough, I had the same feeling when I left the cinema when I watched the first J.J. Abrams Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens, right? I left that movie and I felt, wow, like this was like scripted to death. It felt like every pixel or every millimeter that was filmed for that movie was controlled, was scripted, was run by 15 committees who all approved it. It just felt like overly controlled, right? That's how it felt. And there's a little bit of that in The Rise of Skywalker as well. And I think that is this burden that he has. You don't want to leave anything to chance, okay? You want to control this as much as you can because of the divided fan base, because of the situation that Star Wars is in right now, and all that. So I think you can feel it. And yet, he manages to make this movie kind of touching, right? And emotional in times. I mean, yeah, you can always argue, okay, if Luke and Leia are on screen and the right music kicks in, it's always emotional. But I think it's more than that. In my personal opinion, I think there are scenes in this movie that are genuinely emotional, that are genuinely touching, and especially things like Carrie Fisher's death, right? Princess Leia's death in the movie was treated very respectfully and very appropriate, in my opinion. So anyway, let's get into this before we get carried away with loads of other stuff. Let's try to stick to this kind of little piece of paper, basically, that I have here. So let's start at the beginning. You see the crawl, right? The crawl is coming in. And it gives you a lot of information. Like, it jumped ahead quite a lot. I read the crawl and I was like, wait a second. Leia is training Rey? Like, what happened there? Like, when did that happen? How did they get together? And then everyone already knows that Palpatine is back, right? It's in the crawl. It's like the second sentence. And now Kylo Ren wants to hunt him down. And I'm like, hold on, there seems to be a story missing here. Like, it just already felt like there's a lot happening that I haven't even seen. And then the movie just keeps that pace. So we're kicking off with Kylo Ren trying to find the Emperor Palpatine. And it felt like 5 minutes of the movie. He goes here, he goes there, finds him, blows to the planet, goes in, boom, there's Palpatine. He's confronted with Palpatine. And you're instantly confronted with this extremely fast pace of this film. And it kind of keeps that all the way through. It nearly feels convoluted at times. And it gets a bit hard to follow. I mean, for people like us or like me, it's probably not that hard to follow because we're that deep embedded in the Star Wars lore, so it's a bit easier. But for someone who's not that big of a Star Wars fan, I'd imagine it felt quite messy and just very, very fast at times. Another thing I noticed, and there are lots of good things. It really feels like I'm ranting away about this film now, but no, there are lots of positive moments, but there are also a lot of cringe moments and moments where you're just like, this doesn't feel right. Yeah, like for example, the whole force healing thing. Like Rey stabs Kylo with the lightsaber, and now he's gonna die, but she heals him, and there's force healing. And I know we've been introduced to it in The Mandalorian. It's a thing now. It's canon now, force healing and all that. And it might have been in the comics. I don't know. But it just didn't feel appropriate. It feels weird. It's one of those things where you're like, nobody's ever really gone. Oh, he's dead. Now he is not dead. It's the ability of reversing death to an extent, which is really weird and makes everything kind of pointless, if you know what I mean. And later we've seen when Kylo Ren dies, spoiler, before that Rey kind of dies, and then Kylo brings her back to life, dies himself, and then he disappears, right? Like Obi-Wan did. And it's like, okay, but Rey was just dead. Why did she not disappear? Is it like death was waiting a second? It's like, oh no, she might be revived. So we're waiting, and then Kylo dies, and he's like instantly disappears. It's just little things like this where you're like, this is just a bit unnecessary, you know? That scene could have been written differently and you could have avoided the whole nudge towards force healing and all that. Was that really necessary? Another thing that was cringeworthy and felt weird and just out of place was this whole light jump hopping. I don't know if you remember that scene where he's like, oh no, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just light jump hopping. And he just poof and pushes the light jump again and again, and he's in the middle of an asteroid field or like a really tight environment with a spaceship. Let's jump again, and it just makes no sense. You know, I'm sitting there like, bro, I mean, you just ruined it because I cannot believe what you're showing me at all. I mean, I get it, it's all science fiction fantasy, but this is just somehow going too far. I can't believe that this light jump works. And beyond that, I think it was like episode 4 or 5, there's the scene where Luke asks a question about jumping to light speed to Han Solo, and Han Solo is like, no, we gotta calculate this super correct, right? Because if we don't calculate it correct, it can have like the space-time continuum effects and blah, blah, blah. And he says like, you have to be quite careful with light jumping. Yet here we are doing, you know, weird light jump hopping in The Rise of Skywalker. So it just felt out of place and I was a bit cringing. I hate to say the next one, but it's my honest opinion and you might hate me for it, but I felt that the whole Lando reappearance was not really necessary. First of all, he didn't really have any role. He didn't do much. There was like a brief conversation between the characters and him. He didn't say much in the day. Later on, you just see him in the Millennium Falcon flying around. And I get it. Those are iconic images, right? It's like, oh my God, Lando, he's back. There he is. But at the same time, it's like, does it add something to this except maybe ticking like a fanboy service box? I mean, give him at least like a real role. Like look at the actor, right? And then see what you can do with it. Embed him properly or don't go there. Right, that's kind of my opinion. And then the whole bow and arrow shooting when they're riding their weird alien horses on the Star Destroyer and shoot down spaceships with bow and arrow. And I'm just sitting in the cinema, I'm like, Jesus, man, what am I watching? Right, this is just, it's just stupid. I mean, sorry, it's just stupid. It breaks all believability. Okay, I get it. The whole thing is science fiction fantasy. It is not a believable, realistic scenario, but this somehow broke all immersions in those moments. But because of the fast pace of this film, it kind of immediately draws you back in. And you're like, oh, okay, no, a minute later, you nearly have forgotten about it because you're in a different place and a different story and different characters. So it's that fast pace that nearly makes you instantly forget how horrible some of those scenes were. And then there are these big reveals, right? It feels like every Star Wars movie needs like a big family reveal. I am your uncle, you are my brother, he is my father, right? We need to have that in kind of every... Did you know, by the way, fun fact, it was originally written by George Lucas that the Emperor, that Palpatine, is responsible for Anakin. So it was not like the Force or something that created him, right, and brought him on the Earth. No, it was Palpatine who impregnated, somehow using the Force, obviously not physically, Anakin's mother. And that's how. But then it was taken out, right? He removed it from the movie, so it's never mentioned. It's like hinted towards very subtly in a few occasions in the prequels. But now it has been moved back into canon, right? So now this story is part of canon as well, that actually the Emperor Palpatine is responsible for creating Anakin, so to say. And now in this movie, we're getting one of the big reveals, which is that Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter, right? I mean, in all fairness, nobody saw that one coming. I didn't see that one coming. I think it's just because we've never seen Palpatine with a woman or in any relationship, but now also that like Anakin is also kind of created by Palpatine. It might be that Rey's parents are just like an experiment, right? Like they're cloned basically, or they're like artificially replicated children of Palpatine. So I think it kind of goes more into that direction. Nobody saw it coming, but at the same time, it's also like, does always everyone have to be related? Like, can Rey not just be a clone or just nobody, and by chance she became this super powerful Jedi? I don't know. It just felt also a little bit odd. I noticed that the music is not as iconic and good as in the previous movies. It's not bad, don't get me wrong, but you just have those iconic moments that are missing. Like, for example, if you look back at the fight between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul, right, where you have this iconic music that matches the scene, and looking at some of the making-ofs of those Star Wars movies, the early ones, very much the music was designed around the vision of the scene, right? You were looking at the scene, you were like, this is going to be this iconic fight between those characters. This is where it's going to happen. This is how it feels. Now you compose the music for it, and I think you can feel that they kind of edited on this one, the Rise of Skywalker, till the last minute. There was not really a clear vision for the scene, where they're like, oh, this is going to be the iconic scene and we need music that supports this. It was a lot of shuffled around it. That's at least how it felt to me. A lot of scenes were shuffled around last minute, and I think the music suffered from that. Because it gives you less control of tailoring music to exact scenes if you're constantly changing the scenes. So it showed a little bit that there's a lack of an overall vision, but I get to that at a later point in time. But yeah, I noticed the music wasn't really that iconic. It wasn't bad, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't as iconic, I guess. Then the Knights of Ren. Before this movie, everyone spoke about the Knights of Ren, and it's like, we want to know more about them. We want them to be in this film, and they were, but we know nothing about them. It just feels, again, like one of those things where you're like, there's another story in there, right? Like the Knights of Ren, who are they? What's the story? We got nothing. They don't even talk, right? They just walk around dubiously in their black robes. And we know, oh, that must be the Knights of Ren. But that's kind of all we got. It just felt a bit underdeveloped, if you know what I mean. Like, you could have made more of this. And I think that also was a red thread throughout this whole film. A lot of things felt like cut short. For example, I know that in the original script, in the very first scene where, no, not very first, but in the early beginning where Kylo meets Palpatine, in the original script, Kylo was very skeptical and he assumed it's like an illusion, right? And he's walking around and he's like, no, this is not real. You're dead and stuff. And he was doubting that Palpatine is actually real. They cut all that out. So now as a result, you just have this very short scene where he goes in, 3 sentences, Palpatine has got him on board, now they are best friends, seemingly, and then he leaves. And it just, this kind of stuff just, again, felt underdeveloped, like the Knights of Ren. And there are a few more examples in this film where you're like, let's just make the movie another 40 minutes longer, Who cares? It's the end of this 9-movie epic, okay? Let's make it 40 minutes longer and tell the story of the Knights of Ren, and go into those details and have the long conversation between Palpatine and Kylo Ren. Spend the time on it. Don't rush through it so much. But I'm sure those are like committee decisions, that even people like J.J. Abrams has not really control over. Then the fleet rises out of the surface, right? We're on the planet, and Palpatine's like, I've prepared this fleet, and he moves his hands, and he can control thousands, seemingly, or hundreds of these Star Destroyers coming out of the surface, and then later on, he controls the weather, right? When there's the battle going on, he sends these lightnings, his iconic lightnings, up to the sky, and they take down all the good spaceships and do all that. So he's like incredibly powerful. And then towards the end, you have that scene where Rey stands up in front of him and like, one lightsaber to hold those flashes is not enough. But if I have two lightsabers, it kind of falls into the cringe category again a little bit when she kind of beat him with two lightsabers, one from Luke, one from Leia. I get it, it's like the meaning behind it and the significance of the items and the lightsabers in the moment. I get all that, but it still felt a bit forced, for lack of a better word. It felt like something that sounds good on paper. You read it and you're like, oh my god, it's the weapons of the ancestors who then strike down. It sounds great from like a philosophical point of view nearly, but on the actual screen it felt a little bit like, it's not really realistic. And in the vein of that, now Palpatine, wants to start this new empire, and he has thousands of Star Destroyers, or hundreds, or whatever the number is, and they get destroyed in the final battle. Right, but whatever happens to all the other planets, those outposts that are controlled by the First Order? What's going on? Like, that story is not being told. Yes, we have defeated the Emperor and we have destroyed all his new army. But what happened with the old army? Right? It's not that the First Order didn't exist. So it's another thing where you're like, just suspend your disbelief. Just roll with it. We're moving very fast here. Just roll with it. But it did feel a little bit, off. There were a few things that just felt off. Another thing, like, I just thought about Luke when he was training with Leia. You got, like, first of all, Leia's face was off, right? When that helmet opened, I get it that they were trying to impersonate Carrie Fisher's young face, but it didn't really work. It didn't really look like her. And I'm wondering, like, why don't you find two actors that literally look 99% the same? I know there's this guy, even a famous actor out there, who looks exactly like Mark Hamill. If you Google that, you'll find his image. Like, why don't you put those, like, doubles into those characters? Then you can do maybe minor tweaks digitally to make it look even more like Leia or Luke. But why do you have to CGI the whole thing? It just didn't feel right. And then another thing, like, I felt with the Leia character, right? So Leia, she's a princess, right? I'm not saying that she could not learn the ways of the Force and do this rough training and stuff, but it collided a little bit in my head because, while Leia is incredibly strong and charismatic, she also, because she's a princess, she had a certain grace to her. It didn't feel like she's the kind of girl that robs through the mud, and then sweats and shoots 15 targets on the way and learns the way of the Force and balances stones. It just, I don't know. It's nothing I really can put my finger on, but it feels a little bit off again. Like, is Leia really this kind of character who becomes this quite powerful Jedi, so to say? I don't know. Anyway, guys, I mean, this video very much looks like I'm hating on the film. I don't want to hate on the film. There were loads of good moments in it, and I was thoroughly entertained throughout. And if you ask me, should I go see the film? Yes, I think you should. I would recommend it to anyone to go see the film. It's a fun movie. Don't go in with too high expectations. It concludes a 9-movie trilogy. Your expectations are gonna be too high anyway. But there are those points of criticism, and I think they are valid. And I think the longer the movie is gonna be out, the more of those points are gonna be revealed, because obviously people are gonna look in depth at this film over time. So we're coming to kind of a conclusion here, right? I think it felt, once again, I don't know if you can judge anyone for that, but like a remake, right? At the ending, we've beaten the Empire or the First Order or the Last Order or whatever they're called now. The Ewoks dance, right? And it felt very much like another remake of a Star Wars story we already know. And that's why I think, like, for example, Rogue One was such a great film, because even we kind of knew what was happening. It was some new content, new characters. It was just a new story. And I feel with those Star Wars films, with this main trilogy, we're kind of always getting the same thing. And that is something you have to give George Lucas credit for. At least the prequels are not as much of a remake in their content, in their story, as those new movies. He tried to do something new. You can say he failed or you liked it, but at least he tried something new. He tried something fresh. The only aspect where I could see J.J. Abrams and Chris Terrio, the other screenplay writer of this film, justifying this kind of remake policy that's going on in the Star Wars universe is by saying that it's basically history is an ever-repeating story, right? It's like guy comes up, everyone thinks he or she is the chosen one, and it fails, it didn't go, joins the dark side. Guy comes up, it's the chosen one, and it goes wrong somehow. Comes up. So the idea of the Star Wars universe, the overarching concept is that it's an ever-repeating battle between good and bad. And that's why these movies always feel like remakes, because you're telling a repetition of history, right? Even we say it, history keeps repeating itself. So it's nearly like, I'm not justifying it. I think it's a bit weak that we can't come up with better stories, but that would be a justification or a rationale to explain it, that it is the idea of history always repeating itself and that you can't really break out of this loop or something along those lines. The movie is designed to overwhelm you. And it is, I think, the main problem with the new trilogy overall, that there is no red thread. It is clear that when they started making The Force Awakens, there was no guideline or any structural idea of the following movies. These movies were not designed as a trilogy, which is ridiculous because obviously it will be a trilogy. So that is a massive failure on Disney's side, on probably also J.J. Abrams' side. I don't know who's controlling that. I don't think personally that is just Kathleen Kennedy pulling all the strings. I'm sure she's heavily involved in it. But, you know, committees and stuff. Why was there no bigger rationale for this film? Why is there no overarching outline for this trilogy? It feels messy, it feels unorganized and unstructured, and it's not great because a lot of potential is kind of given away. And if you look at those 3 movies now, the new trilogy as a whole, episode 9 nearly feels like, when it starts, it left off where The Force Awakens ended, nearly. Do you know what I mean? Like, episode 9 is what episode 8 should have been. You see them bonding, you see the group coming together. You know, maybe Palpatine is back already in episode 8 or whatever, and then it leads up to this final big epic in episode 9 that has been built up in the movie beforehand. But as we all know, with The Last Jedi and Rian Johnson, it didn't build up to it. It just destroyed a lot of things, and they did redeem a lot of things in this film, like where Luke even admits he was wrong, right? Like, that is just a funny scene where he's like, you know, I was wrong, I was very angry at the time, or whatever he says, and you're like, oh man, you just kind of side-kicked towards Rian Johnson there and nullified the stuff that he did. Fine, you know, I'm not too upset about it. And while this video that I just did sounded very negative and angry and disappointed, again, I think the movie is worth watching. It's a good movie, it's an entertaining movie, it's not a complete car crash, you know, like, in my opinion, like The Last Jedi was. Let's see how it develops. Let's see what people make of it over time, breaking it down. I think definitely there's going to be a massive hater scene, because you've got people out there feeding whole channels just with hating on Star Wars, and a movie like this with all the points I just listed, and those are just the points that kind of came to my head thinking about it leaving the cinema. There's going to be a lot of people who just hang up hundreds and hundreds of videos on these points and destroying Star Wars even more and being against everything. Personally, I think people got to chill their base down, okay? You can't be so serious. I get it. We grew up with these movies, right? It's more than just a movie. Like, it means a lot to a lot of people. But calm down, bro, okay? Like, honestly, you don't need to overly hate and make these movies into more than they actually are. It's a new trilogy. Nobody's going to take your old trilogy from you. You know, nobody's destroying those. So people gotta chill. If you're a Star Wars hater, calm down, bro. It's all good. We can criticize, but we should really keep it within reason. And that's what I hope to find down in the comment section below, guys, because if you have thoughts on this, please share them underneath. What was your overall feeling on the movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you torn apart? Is it both? Share all that down in the comment section below. I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, this little ramble of mine. If you did, please leave a like. That would be much appreciated. You can also subscribe to the channel. I saw we have a lot of new subscribers due to the Star Trek video I uploaded about a year ago. So welcome, everyone who's new to the channel. Hope to see you around. Hope to see you in the comments. Guys, take care, and I'll see you next time. I'm out. Bye.